going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. With that being said, let's jump into a Tuesday edition of Pistons Daily. So first things first, I wanted to just talk about training camp. I'm recording this on Monday, September 29th. You guys will be seeing this on Tuesday, but training camp and media day started, and I just wanted to touch on some of the different quotes, some of the different videos, and just things that I'm really excited about coming out of training camp. But first things first, if you guys don't follow Amari Sankofa II on Twitter or anything, he writes for the Detroit Free Press, and he'll be covering training camp extensively. He drops all the quotes, all the videos, asks great questions, and is just a terrific beat reporter. So go check out his stuff. There's just so many bases for me to cover in these videos, and I just want to pick a couple different quotes and whatnot. But Amari and Kukalil and Eric Vincent and a lot of these other beat reporters, they're going to give you every single piece of information you could possibly want. They're all on site. They're covering the Pistons every day. So go check their stuff out just for a more extensive look at what's going on at training camp. But I will dive into just some different quotes that I heard from today that I've seen on Twitter, some videos and whatnot. And the first thing was just the fact that JB Bickerstaff said that there is potentially going to be 5 guys on the court who are all 6'8 plus. I will say it's closer to 6'7", 6'6", but when you're looking at a guy like Cade Cunningham, he's 6'6 listed, but I think he's closer to 6'7 than he is 6'6, maybe even 6'8. I saw some pictures of him this summer, and he looks like he's maybe an inch shorter than Jalen Duran, who's listed at 6'11. So Cade Cunningham's height is anywhere from 6'6 to, let's say, 6'9 right now. But technically, yeah, he could be a guy who's around 6'8 with shoes on and the afro. Well, I guess not the afro, but with his hair. So I think JB Bickerstaff's onto something here, because when you're just looking at this team overall, they didn't really have a ton of height and length last year outside of, Ausar and Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duran. And those guys are all, 6'8", 6'9", and 6'11", respectively. So it's nice to know that the Pistons now have some more just depth and some more height at different areas, especially at the guard position, because now you have Caris LeVert, who's 6'7". You have Duran and Robinson, who's listed at 6'7". Ausar is 6'8", or 6'7", 6'8". Ron is 6'8". Jalen Duran 6'11". Isaiah Stewart 6'9". So there's potentially going to be lineups where you have Cade at the 1, Caris LeVert at the 2, maybe you throw Duran Robinson at the 3, Tobias at the 4, Ron Holland or Ausar at the 4, and then you have Jalen Duran at the 5. And like JB Bickerstaff mentioned, you're going to have an all lineup of above 6'7", 6'8", and that's just very, very difficult to put together in today's NBA and still have at least a little bit of floor spacing with Caris LeVert and Duran Robinson. And then obviously, just depending on what Tobias Harris brings from three-point range, Ausar is not going to really give you that. But let's say Ron Holland comes off the bench and averages 34% from 3 this year, then he's a guy that could play that small ball 4, also play, or I guess, not small ball, more like tall ball 4, and can also play at the 3 position as well if you want to run Ausar Thompson at the 4 or vice versa. So there's just so many different lineup combinations, and I'm just glad that JB Bickerstaff was able to mention that. I think when you're looking at the versatility overall from this team, it's a lot deeper than it was last year when it comes to height, because Tim Hardaway Jr. is around 6'3", Malik Beasley's around 6'3", 6'4", Dennis Schroeder's around 6'2", so you had a little bit of a cap on just how much height you could play all at once, because a lot of the time, 1 or 2 of those 3 guys I just mentioned were on the court. And again, we've talked about it with Marcus Sasser. Small point guards are, at a premium in the NBA right now, just because there is so many unbelievable, big, strong, athletic point guards like Cade Cunningham and like Luka Doncic that are kind of more of the prototypical point guard nowadays, which is kind of deferred from what it was even in the 2010s. So I think it's nice to have that luxury and have a lineup that you can throw out there and you can rely on length and still have athleticism and quickness. That's going to be very, very fun. So glad that JB Bickerstaff mentioned that out of camp. But moving on, he also talked about Point Ausar. He talked about how much more comfortable Ausar Thompson is with the ball in his hands. Then Cade Cunningham mentioned that Ausar Thompson is a very, very likely breakout candidate and that he's going to turn some heads this year. And we've been talking about it all offseason that Ausar Thompson is my predicted breakout player for this Pistons team. He's going to take that really, really big leap that we kind of expect him to take. And I think he's going to be that next star on this team next to Cade Cunningham, a two-way star who thrives on defense and also becomes a very solid offensive player as well. And this just makes me more confident that JB and Cade Cunningham are coming out and saying that Ausar looks great so far, and he looks polished. He had a full offseason. And again, you have to look back on this. He literally came back from blood clots last year. He had limited to no time to condition, and he was able to affect this team in so many ways, in a positive way, when he came back. Again, going into his second year, coming off of a year where the Pistons won 14 games, and he still was able to not miss a single beat. Yes, there was a minute restriction, but that's not going to be the case this year. And everything that he's done in 2 years has put people on notice and has surprised people, and I expect that to be the case once again heading into year 3. I think all defensive first team or second team is very plausible. I think most improved player is also extremely achievable for him. And I do think that at the end of it, we're going to be looking at him as a top 75, if not top 50 player in the entire NBA, because he is going to take that leap and just be an unbelievable player for this Pistons team. But let me know in the comment section if you guys are buying it, if you guys think that Ausar can take that leap, and just kind of what you're expecting to see from him if he were to kind of turn the heads like Cade Cunningham mentioned. But moving on, Ku Khalil kind of covered this on his Twitter account, so go check out his stuff. He had a bunch of good questions he asked today, also another good beat reporter for the Pistons. And he asked about just the dribble handoff and the pick and roll between Duncan Robinson and Jalen Duran. He asked this to Jalen Duran, and quote unquote, Jalen Duran said, when you're coming off of those screens from the corner and when guys step up, you just to throw it to Bam. I want those same passes. That was kind of him quoting what he said to Duncan Robinson early on when Duncan arrived to Detroit. And clearly, JD is prepared to catch the ball in that high post and have the ball in his hands at the mid-range to make decisions, whether or not he wants to shoot over the top of the defense, whether or not he wants to pass out of it, whether or not he wants to try and get to the paint. And it's very encouraging that he is kind of taking that challenge on, and he probably has watched film of Duncan Robinson. He saw how unbelievable of a passer out of the dribble handoff and out of the pick and roll he was with Bam Adebayo. I know we've talked about it before. I think Jalen Duran has a very good shot of kind of taking that leap like Bam Adebayo did in his fourth and fifth years by extending his offensive game out a little bit farther each year, becoming more comfortable out there. And it starts with having a guy who commands attention on defense when he catches the ball on the pick and roll. And that's exactly what Duncan Robinson does. Teams have to close out on him because he's such an unbelievable movement spot-up shooter that it allows for even a little bit of a sliver of space for Jalen Duran to drive hard, or cut hard to the rim and keep his hands ready. And Duncan Robinson has shown the ability to find his big man on those rolls with Bam Adebayo in Miami. And I do expect that to kind of translate to this team. And I just love that Duncan Robinson mentioned that today. He even mentioned Bam Adebayo. So clearly he knows what's going on with Duncan. He knows how he likes to play. And it's great that they've already talked about it before training camp starts, because I expect to see a lot of set plays where Duncan Robinson is flying off of a screen and allowing him and giving the option to shoot over the top of the defense or find Jalen Duran on that roll. I think it's going to be kind of a staple of this team's offense, because I think a lot of the time in the half court last year, they were kind of looking for that go-to play, and it was usually either Malik Beasley coming hard off of a screen and shooting, or Cade Cunningham going in ISO, or Tobias going in ISO. But those really aren't set plays besides Malik Beasley. But with Duncan Robinson, you can give him 4 different options off of that screen and roll, or off of that off-ball screen where he's catching the ball unlike Malik Beasley, who was most likely going to pull the trigger, Duncan is very good at getting in the triple threat, finding an open teammate, including the roll man or a guy in the corner, or having a guy next to like Cade Cunningham, who even if he gets a little bit of space, Duncan can kick it out to Cade, who can then have more space to operate, whether he wants to get to the cup, whether he wants to try and shoot from the mid-range, from three-point range. It doesn't matter. Again, it's just providing that floor spacing that the rest of this team thrives off of. So very, very excited for Duncan Robinson and Jalen Duran to kind of see how that works. And also very excited that Jalen Duran acknowledged the fact that that's going to be a big staple of this team going forward. And that's something that he can really learn to adapt to, and something that I think is going to help expand his game even more. But before we wrap up the show, I want to continue to do our season expectations. And our new expectation after kind of listening to Media Day is that everyone on this team translates the skills that they've worked on this offseason. I mean, during Media Day, Ron Holland talked about watching defensive film with Ausar Thompson after games even. Just right after a game, they would watch defensive film because Ron Holland wants to become a better defensive player. And obviously, Ausar Thompson is ridiculously good on that end of the floor. So with that, it's all good and well to talk about it, but now I expect Ron Holland becomes a much better defensive player this year. I mean, he was solid last year. There was definitely some holes in the game, but I expect him to be able to hold his own against a bigger player. I expect him to still have quick feet, and I expect him to be a very good defensive player if that's something that he worked on this offseason. Jalen Duran, he talked about his mid-range game. I now expect to see him work on that and utilize that as a part of his game. I don't want him to just be a lob threat. Yes, he is still a great lob threat, and that's going to be a big staple of his game. But also, if he can expand his game out, it's going to open up this offense a ton. So if he's going to talk about it, I hope to see it actually translate on the court. And again, Ausar Thompson, JB Bickerstaff said that Ausar Thompson looks great with the ball in his hands. I now expect JB Bickerstaff to draw up specific plays where Ausar is the main creator, and I expect Ausar Thompson to capitalize on those plays. And it's great. It's great to hear everything is improving, and great to hear out of camp that, there's a lot of different skills that these guys are adding to their bag. But until we actually see it play out on the court, we take it with a grain of salt. I'm not by any means whatsoever saying that I'm doubting this team and I'm doubting that these skills aren't actually going to translate. I really do feel confident that this team is going to significantly improve in so many different areas this year. And, it's just the confidence has to translate. You now have these expectations to improve on last year, to improve on the foundation that you built with this young core, especially because Trajan Langdon specifically came out and said, we are not going to add just to add. We are going to let our young core develop and, gain that camaraderie together and work on their own individual skill sets. Great. Now we expect to see those skill sets start to come to light. Obviously, I don't expect Jaden Ivey to be a 26-point per game scorer, but I do expect him to be a very good three-point shooter and somebody who can be a secondary ball handler next to Cade Cunningham. And that's the same with the rest of these guys who we've been hearing all offseason about the improvements they're making. Now it's time to see it unfold on the court. And that's just a season expectation for me, is I expect this team to improve. I think that's pretty consensus amongst the Pistons fan base. I think that we would be disappointed if they regressed, obviously, but I don't think they will. I do think that they are going to improve, and I do think that this is going to be a very, very competitive team this year. But again, we just have to see it play out, and we'll get to see that in less than a month. So very, very excited, and I'm just glad that basketball is back. I'm glad that they're having media day and training camp. We see players in uniform. We see players talking about their offseason. We see players interacting with one another. And we see that camaraderie coming back. And basketball season's back. Not quite yet. We're close. It's almost October. And that means NBA basketball. So very, very excited. And I will continue to cover training camp and things that we're hearing out of camp. And hopefully we'll get some video of maybe Jalen Duran shooting a mid-range shot or showing off of just some improvements with his overall offensive game and his passing. And maybe we'll see Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson making, back-to-back-to-back threes in a drill or something like that. And of course, I will dissect it and totally overreact, as most of you know that I will. But that's the fun of the off season, and that's the fun of training camp starting, because we have been fiending. We have been absolutely drowning, and we need some basketball, and we're about to get it. So very, very exciting. Love to hear good things coming out of Pistons training camp, and love to see the players all back in the facility, getting along and getting ready for the year. But that's all I've got for you guys today on a Tuesday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it for episode 69 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.